Okay, Chair, I can confirm you're live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending today's meeting on rather a chilly evening at that. And it's the Kingston Area Consultative Committee that's meeting this evening. And the Democratic Services Officer will now conduct a roll call to check who is present at this evening's meeting. And when she calls out your name, could you please switch your microphone on and confirm your attendance by answering present, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Banbridge. Councillor Bone? No. Councillor, we have apologies from Councillor Sandra Collop. Councillor Dickinson? Present. Councillor Howman? Councillor Hudson? Here. Councillor Jones?
Present.
Haven't seen Councillor Joyce. Councillor Kemp might be joining on Zoom. We have apologies from Councillor Lowe. Councillor Rust? Present. Councillor Tyler?
Present.
Councillor Ware? Present. And Councillor Wilkinson? Present. Thank you.
Chair, this meeting did clash with a meeting with Alexa, so that's why Charles won't be here.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jones. Yes. Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. We have also the following officers present in the meeting this evening. Mark Whitmore, the management team representative, and Michelle Drury, assistant director. And please may I remind members that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live via the YouTube. By attending the meeting, you are given your permission to be recorded and streamed. So the apologies that I have for absence are Councillor Sandra Collop, Councillor Joshua No, and Councillor Leslie Banbridge. I have to ask members on item 2 if they have any interests to declare. No, thank you. No, thank you. Item 3, I have no urgent business this evening. And I have no members present under Standing Order 34. I have no chair's correspondence either. And I also would like to mention that we may be joined later on Zoom by Councillor Kemp, who can take in the events of the meeting and the discussion. Also, before we start on item 6, I would like to welcome Councillor Alex Ware, and it is her first meeting this evening, so I hope that goes well for you. Okay. Yeah. Right, so item 6 then is the recommendations on special expenses charged for Kings Lynn, and I will invite Michelle Drury to present the report for us. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And can I say thank you for allowing me the flexibility to bring this back to you at a later date than normal. I'm sure, as you will have all had a chance to read the report, you will see and reflect that it has been very difficult in arriving at the assumptions that are laid before you in terms of the estimates for special expenses next year. So hopefully you've had time to read through the report in detail. So I will just go through the key areas of the report. So 1.3 does give you a list of all of the special expenses that are currently charged for. 1.4 sets out the special expenses that were set out for the current financial year 22-23. And you'll see that the total of those special expenses came to £533,320. That meant that there was a Band D charge for 22-23 of 49.53 on the tax base of 10,768. So at that time, that increase was equated to around 2.12% and was £1.03 on the previous year. Having looked at the estimates of the special expenses for 23-24, you will be aware that we have been in a very volatile economic situation with unprecedented increases in inflation and increases in the England bank rate as well. That has obviously had a knock-on impact on all of the costs that are coming through to us as an authority. And those costs have been estimated and built into the special expenses that are set out before you. So section 2 gives you the estimated special expenses for 23-24. We have incorporated as much as we can the full cost of those special expenses. So you will see that when looking at the total, in comparison to the current year, which was 533,000, that's now arriving at 650,130. And that is a 21.15% increase and £10.47 on the average Band D charge. So it's a stark contrast to the previous year. Section 2.3 sets out what the main movements are, and all of them just reflect the increase in utility costs and the increase in staffing costs as a reflection of the estimated pay award. So the council, as you may be aware, has a council tax principle that's set by central government. As part of the autumn statement, that was amended to 3% or £5. In the current year, we're currently operating under a 2% or £5 limit. If we seek to go above that, we do have to go to a referendum, and obviously that's not something that we would want to do because of not just the complexity of doing that, but there is also a cost of doing that as well. So we do try to remain within our council tax principles where possible. We do look at that £5. So, sorry, just to say the flexibility of increasing from the 2% to the 3% does not give us as an authority any increase in flexibility, because the £5 is still the greater of the two. The 3% still equates to around, the £5 still equates to around 3.2%. So from that perspective, we are still held to the £5 limit. Unless as part of the feedback to government between now and the provisional settlement being announced, whether they give any more leeway or flexibility to that. So at the moment, with the £5 increase, we do have that split notionally, so that the Borough Council allows for £4.50 of that increase for its costs, and the other 50p is applied notionally to special expenses. So you can see that when looking at that increase of £10.47, not only is it way above the special expense notional increase, it's way above the £5 that we're allowed as an authority overall. So with that in mind, we will be looking to supplement the special expenses through the council's budget, and at the moment that's estimated at around 108,000 to bring that back down to the 50p level. We do want to optimise that as much as possible, so when we come to near completion of the budget setting process, we will be running the calculations for the council tax resolution to make sure that we are within the £5 limit, and if there is any flexibility to bring some more of that down so the council's contribution is less, then we will seek to do that. But just to put some context around that, you can see at the bottom of paragraph 2.6 that each 50 pence equates to around £5,400. So there's not a lot of flexibility in the 50p for that. So there haven't been any new schemes that have been proposed or identified to come through special expenses, which is, as you can see, is probably just as well, because there's not capacity to afford any of those at the moment. So, so there are obviously significant financial implications around the special expenses at the moment. As I say, if there is any flexibility that comes through on the £5, then we do have an opportunity to revisit and see what that means for the financial implications for us as an authority overall, and we will reflect that in the special expenses. But at the moment, my recommendation is that we implement these as much as possible with the supplementation from the council's budget to maximise that as much as we can. So I'll pause for any questions.
First of all, thank you very much, Michelle, for that. Obviously, questions and feedback are appreciated. So I think we have Councillor Jones. Ben?
Hi, I've got quite a few questions. Footway lighting is due to increase by 57% or more. In 2017-18, lighting was just 24,120, meaning in 5 years the cost has trebled. Now, I understand energy prices have gone up, and more so for businesses than consumers, but there was a big push to use LED lighting to reduce the cost of the utility part of it. And isn't it time to introduce solar lighting as well to reduce that even further?
So when I joined the authority, there was a refit programme that was being undertaken at the time, and lighting was one of the projects that was feeding into that refit programme. That project has not been implemented at this stage, and in fact, as I understand it, there has been a recent undertaking of the contract around that, which is looking at replacement of a portion of those lights. It has been based on replacement of some of the columns as well, because I understand there's a health and safety issue with some of the columns that have been flagged as red, so that they've been given a RAG status of red, amber, green, and the focus at the moment is to go and replace all of the ones that are flagged as red. And they will do the lighting as part of that as well. So that is a project that's being picked up as part of the property team, and I understand that there will be a rolling programme as part of that. But I will certainly go back and find out about the solar aspect of it and see whether there is scope and whether that's been considered as part of that.
Well, it just seems a bit of a waste when you've got something that's as high as a lamppost, that's unobscured by trees or buildings, that we're not using the sun. I mean, the sun has not increased its charges over this period. Second question, the reason for an increase in charges to the community centre budget is not credible. Many village halls charge £10 an hour or less and £100 all day. Fairsted Community Centre charges £29 an hour, evenings and weekends. That's one of the reasons why such a high level of subsidising is needed. South Lynn Community Centre has a charity headway hiring one room for a cost of £14,500 or more per year. As a Live West Norfolk run the community centres, there should be no business rates charge, which is something that needs to be checked.
I will check that. I believe that they are operating them on our behalf, but those buildings still belong to us. So I will go back and check what the legislation is around that and whether that is something that is allowable. I know that they have recently undergone the revaluation, which the valuation office has undertaken. As you may be aware, the revaluation will be implemented from the 1st of April 2023. And as part of that, I do understand that the business rates for the community centres has come down a little bit. So there will be a reduction slightly to feed through this, because this is based on the rates prior to that information becoming available. So there will be an adjustment to that, but I will follow up and check whether they are allowed the discretionary rates relief, which is what you're referring to, which we have on our leisure sites. And I'll see whether that is applicable to the community centres.
Right, pavilion costs have doubled in the last 5 years. They're rarely used. An explanation needs to be sought for these costs. Cleaning is not acceptable as a reason for such high costs, because if they're not used, they will not need cleaning.
Again, I'll feed your comments back to the team who managed those. I'm afraid I don't have the detail of that in front of me, but I will feed your comments back.
And last one, open spaces is another increase by 50,000 in 5 years. The cost for staff will not increase beyond £15 an hour, but there is likely to be another administration charge of 50% or plus percent, taking it up to around £25 an hour for the work done.
I am aware that the staff costs that have been incorporated have been based on the current year's pay award and an estimate for next year. So there shouldn't be any more than that which has been absorbed as part of the staffing increases.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I've got Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Rust. Yeah, so Councillor Wilkinson, Margaret.
And first of all, I'd like to ask on the Fairstead Community Centre, what is the income? As I'm told, that's run as a business now. It's not a community centre.
I will have to go back and find that information out for you. I don't have that information available with me today.
The other question. Footway lighting, you say it's not implemented. I don't know if this comes into this remit, but as with footway lighting, many of the lights are quite often out. Is it now that only if you ring in that somebody comes out to check the light and it's repaired, because they can be out for weeks, and if nobody's phoned, nothing happens? So that's something I would like to know. What is the correct process? Somebody used to come round regularly and check the lights, but now it appears that they just stay out until somebody rings.
Okay, thank you. Again, that's an operational matter, so I will follow that back up with the team. And
obviously, if you've got a faulty light bulb that could be shorting out, that will be costing you more electricity, because if you've got a dead short in the lamppost, you'll be wasting energy. So really that should be done routinely.
Thank you, Margaret. Councillor Joe.
Thank you. I have a couple of points. You referred to the refit scheme related to the lights and said that they'd been assessed on a RAG rating, and the red ones were going to be replaced first. This specifically relates to the lights in Kings Lynn. So why potentially should we have to pay more on our special expenses because of the council's failure to replace the lights related to our area? And then the other point is, it says in here that there won't be any new schemes brought forward unless they're fully funded. What is the situation with the parish councils funding for new schemes? Because it appears to me, if parish councils are getting sufficient funds to fund new schemes, the area of Kings Lynn, which is unparished, will suffer a significant detriment and disadvantage, when in matter of fact, the population we serve are already more disadvantaged than those parish areas. And so we should have additional funds for new schemes to level up. Isn't that what the Tory government claimed it wants to do? To level up so our residents don't suffer a disadvantage. So if parish councils are continuing to have new schemes, I do not think it's appropriate that we should not be able to bring new schemes to the Consultative, Kings Lynn Area Consultative Committee.
With regard to parish and town councils, obviously they will have their own levies that they are able to pass on to their parishioners. They have no cap on their increases either. So if they wanted to go ahead with a project, they could raise that income through their levy, which comes through the council tax. Unfortunately, Kings Lynn doesn't have the same flexibilities around that. Obviously, the borough council's council tax supports that, and that's why there is this notional split. I wouldn't say that there is a moratorium on bringing any future schemes forward. I think we just have to bear in mind that in the current climate, we're obviously seeing this significant increase in the costs, which are we're having to absorb. So in terms of having any capacity at the moment for any schemes, there isn't any flexibility to do that, but obviously it is within your ability to put any recommendations for that forward and to see whether Cabinet or Council would support that. So so it's not to say no, don't bring any schemes forward, it's just really to raise your attention around the financial ability of or affordability of it in the current climate.
I would have thought it would have been a priority for the council to try and reduce its utility costs by using solar energy and solar street lights, because that will save the taxpayer ultimately lots of money. It will do us well for our green credentials because we're using renewable energy.
Yeah, I will. Obviously, I will go back and feedback your comments and see. I'm not aware whether that any feasibility has been undertaken on that and what the outcome of that was. So it will be something that I'll have to seek some answers to for you.
We've been asleep then for quite some time, because if we started to do the LED refit some time ago and then stopped, you know, we had a perfect chance to get out there and put solar panels on and refit with LEDs and try and reduce the cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, the refit programme, this element of it was halted for a while. And as I understand it, the contract went out to re-tender because the initial one has come back significantly high. But there has been a second refit scheme that had a number of discrete projects around air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps, etc. And those schemes have gone ahead and they have been completed. So
but
it's
they're
not that
energy efficient, because you have to have the electricity on 24/7, which at the current prices means it costs more to heat a building. So they're not really the answer.
As I say, I'll feed your comments back and I'll see if I can seek some clarity for you.
Thank you. Now, are there any other points, comments, questions from anybody, please?
I've got my hand up, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear. I can hear you, Alex. Anyway.
Thank you. Well, yes, I would like to echo what Councillor Jones has said about the community centres, and I'd like to know the figure for the income to the council from Southland Community Centre. But also, I was there yesterday, and one of the doors had a notice on that it was occupied by the England football team. Now, I thought that was the audit committee, so who knows? But if it's the case that we've got council officers in part of the community centre, is that credited as income to the community centre because it's being used? So can you answer that, please? But also with footway lighting, which I take to be street lights, because footway, you sort of think of a bulb on the ground. We're talking about street lights. And I would like to mention, with the cost that's gone up, it occurs to me in some parts of Lynn, the town centre, or places like Gaywood Road, after dark now, there are a lot of people riding bicycles wearing black with no lights on their bikes, and one has to put the beam on one's car just to see them. And it seems that the lighting's been turned down too much for safety. Now, I'm not suggesting we should be using more energy, because I'm saying we should have LED, we should have solar panels. But I think it's got ridiculous in Lynn, because you know, people are walking around and cycling, and obviously people should have have lamps on their cycles, but it's becoming quite a dangerous situation. And the third point is about the governance, and I think members of this panel are quite right comparing the town's governance with the parish councils, where they have their own finance officer that will draw up the costings, and the parish council will then vote on the precept, but it can choose its own schemes. It has a lot more freedom and a lot more ability to decide what it wants to do, whereas ultimately these figures that we've got here come down from on high. They're presented to us and we're absolutely sure they're right, but we don't really feel we have as much input in them, in the drawing up of them, as say happens in the parish councils. And I think we do need to be able to set our own projects and not have this idea that, you know, they've got to be fully funded. Well, parish councils have funds that they can raise for their own projects, and Lynn is the biggest parish in the borough. It's 43,000 people who are, of course, in a lot more need than many people in some of the villages. So I think we need to think about how we can make the governance more transparent and accountable to serve the needs of the people in the town. So I've got those 3 points, and I would very much like those to be answered, please, about the footways and the Southern Community Centre income, and about how we can improve the governance. I mean, should we have a governance working group about improving governance in the town, maybe more surveys of residents that we could do? Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Sorry?
Point of order, please.
Yes.
Councillor Kemp asked I wouldn't want to not to have her say. She's not in the room and therefore not part of this group. She's technically attending under Standing Order 34. And those rules would apply.
Yeah, could I have
Voted though, has she?
No one can
No,
still
she's-
ask questions.
So she's asked a question. And
Yes.
so
Could-
of course,
Yeah, could the officers please?
don't normally have questions answered.
Yeah, could officers just clarify the legal, as it were, the legal situation? As I understood it, Councillor, I might be wrong, but as I understood it, Councillor Kemp cannot vote, but she can ask questions and participate. But could we have the actual, you know, the exact situation, please, from officers? So that's the point's clarified.
Yeah, it's as you say, Chair, she can attend and ask a question, but she cannot vote if we wanted to vote for anything, so.
And having asked some questions, they can be answered quite legitimately, is that, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the situation, apparently, yeah.
That is contrary to what we've been told at the meeting.
Well, but as far as I'm concerned, the officers,
Chair.
as far as I'm concerned, officers is, look, you know, if an officer is not telling us the truth, then there is a problem.
As I said, your chair, so I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing with you. Thank you.
Right, so, sorry, would you, Michelle, and by the way, while I am speaking, I think this, if I could just make a comment on the second point, Alex, Councillor Kemp, I would also confirm that I regret to say that in my experience, particularly when it is dark, a lot of cyclists, particularly younger members of the community, do not have lights. They do wear dark clothing, quite a high proportion, regrettably. And when there are areas, say footpaths, cycle paths, where there is inadequate or poor lighting, it can be a problem. And also, I know that some people, some members of the community, both young and old, do feel unsafe. So that is the point I think has been mentioned earlier about lighting and so on being checked or not checked, unless people complain. I think is an issue which I sympathise with very much. But anyway, Michelle, if you could try and address some of the other points that Councillor Kemp has raised, please.
Thank you. Again, in the context of my response regarding the Fairstead income, I will include the South Lynn Centre income as part of that request, and I'll bring that information back so you can see what the income levels are for both of the centres. As I don't have that information available to me now. Again, with the poor lighting and the issue with cyclists, that's something that I will also feed back to the appropriate team, as well as the issue around the process of coming out to fix lights that are not working. So I'll try and seek some responses and feed that back to you as well. And I'm afraid I've forgotten what the third.
Oh yes, Michelle,
is.
there was the point. Thank you. The point about the income. Is it if officers are working in the Southland Community Centre, is income credited to the community centre on the basis that it's being occupied? How does that work? Because otherwise it might not look as if the community centre is being utilised as much as it is, do you see?
Yeah. So I understand that there is income that is credited to the centres, obviously, for hiring out of the rooms. With regards to the occupancy where council staff are occupying, those costs are not passed on through special expenses, they're absorbed through the council. So you won't pick those up. Obviously, what I've reflected here for next year is the full cost. But you'll see in terms of the contribution that the council will be making of 108,000, that obviously is way in excess of the costs for the community centres anyway. So so that will offset it in that capacity. The third point you made, actually, it has come back to me, was around the governance, and you had posed the question about whether there should be a working group, and I think I will defer that question back to your colleagues here for a debate on that, because that's obviously not something that I would be able to make a decision on.
What do you yeah, Margaret, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Can I just clarify that you say you're going to look into these questions and then you will feed back? Can I ask that that's feedback to all the members on the committee? Because I find quite often it goes back to the individual, and I don't think that's fair. Everyone should be aware of the answers.
Yeah, that's the process that I normally undertake. I'll take the questions away, I'll gather the responses, and then I'll send them back to Democratic Services, and they will send them out to you.
Thank you very much.
Just with footway lighting, on one of my many trips down to Basingstoke at 4 o'clock in the morning, some of the villages that I travel through on my journey don't actually have lights on the footpath. They have cat's eyes in their sides, either side of the path, which illuminates, obviously, as you're going along. Might this be a way of the council kind of saving money on lighting costs, but still keeping it lit up for those who do use lights on their bike?
I am wondering whether it would be worthwhile to bring someone in from the team who could perhaps do a presentation and answer all of your questions as part of a collective debate. Because it is obviously, because it's operational, I don't have those answers myself, and I would be just cascading them back. I'll take that back and get something in motion.
Please, go.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, you are.
Because I made the statement earlier, I'd like to correct myself, having looked at the Constitution, and explain why that misunderstanding might have come about. So, for Cabinet, a member at any understanding order 34 only has the right to make a statement. At scrutiny bodies, they have the right to ask questions. And at other council bodies, such as this, they have the right to contribute to the debate. So I stand corrected. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. Thank you. Okay, much appreciated. Are there any other comments, points that people wish to make, or on any way forward? Yeah, please.
Sorry, Chair. Do we need to have another meeting to have this presentation before we can
Yeah, or
come to a conclusion on it?
yeah,
Because-
or was the intention to incorporate it in a normal CLAC meeting, or would it?
Yeah, it's.
What?
Because it's.
See, we've got constraints in the budget timetable, but
Well,
there seem to be things that people are asking for clarification on. So,
yeah, I mean, there's either answers that could be emailed, or if or at another meeting, or the answers or the explanation at another CLAC meeting. You know, the next CLAC. I mean, obviously, if a CLAC meeting, a regular CLAC meeting comes first before we could get an extra meeting. I'm not a one for extra meetings for all sorts of reasons, but you know, that they're the sort of possible. So I don't know what to.
Yes,
Yeah, Michelle.
I would say that in terms of the questions and discussion that you're looking for, it won't make an impact on the figures or feed into the budget. So you can actually build it into one of your usual CLAC meetings if that's your preference.
Members, of course, but yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I'm proposing that we put off the options, making a decision until we have the answers that have to the questions, because I don't think that we're in a position to be able to take up one of these recommendations without those answers. We have a responsibility to get the best for the residents that we cover. This feels to me like they're going to suffer a detriment. I'm not one for voting to see our local area suffer. And so I'm proposing that we defer the decision until we get the answers.
Yeah, I haven't got a problem with that at all, personally, as chair. Just where the decision is made. That's all I'm saying. I agree with Joe. No problem with that. All I'm saying is, okay, so we need answers to the questions before we make a decision. Do we have an extra meeting as well as the other CLAC meeting, or do we incorporate it within the next CLAC meeting? What comes first? What is, practical? I'm being practical now. Simple as that.
Do you need this signed off before you can do anything else, is the question, because we need the answers before we can actually decide on whether we're going to rubber stamp this or not.
Our next CLAC is the 30th of January.
Yes. Sorry, please go ahead.
thank you, Chair. I think we need to understand the overall position, and I need to make sure I've got it clear in my mind as well. So we're saying that in terms of the overall council tax for the borough, we can only increase it by £5 on the Band D property. And in the figures that you presented to us, Michelle, you are suggesting an increase of £10.47 is required, which is more than double than the maximum permitted. Have I misunderstood that?
No, you haven't. So what?
Okay, so
What I've reflected in table 2.2 is the estimate of the special expense costs that we will incur in 23-24. The proposal is that we're only passing on 50 pence of that increase through here, and the rest is absorbed by the borough council budget. So any answers I come back to you will not bring these costs back down to the 50p. So the Borough Council is picking up the cost of that. So anything that we come back to you with is not going to make a difference in terms of the costs that are going through the budget. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that?
And it won't impact on the amount that is charged to our residents. We will only be charging our residents 50p of that £10.47. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you for clarifying. Because it doesn't.
Yeah.
Christine.
If we're only passing on to the residents 50 pence, what are you going to do for the other £10?
It's absorbed by the Borough Council's budget as a whole.
So that means
So
we're going to have to spread the money thinner. Things are going to have to spread out. Otherwise, you're going to have to cut some of these estimated costs for 23-24. I mean, open spaces, you say is upping to 339,320, which is really quite an exorbitant uplift. I mean, you say that's going to be for increasing in salaries and what is it? Increase against a reflection of staffing costs as well as inflationary increases. Bit wishy-washy.
Right. It's probably worth me just explaining a little bit more background in terms of the whole council setting process for the council overall. So as I've set out in the report, the council are limited to increase council tax by £5. So we are seeing unprecedented inflationary increases that we are incurring as a council. We are expecting 189% increase in utility costs next year, and we cannot pass that on through council tax. So, and I'm sure you can appreciate that when you're looking at your own budget at home, if you're only getting the same amount of income and you're seeing those costs go up, you are having to pull back in some other areas to compensate for it. And that's the same situation for us as a council. We're having to look at the whole of our budget and look at where we can reduce some things, increase income in some areas, fees and charges, looking to cut back spend in other areas to try and bring us in with a funded budget for next year within the constraints that we've got. So, and that's the situation that all authorities are placed with at the moment.
If you know that we're going to have to cut other things, why are we not rejuggling the budget to show what we have actually got to spend instead of floating into 23, knowing that we have a budget higher than we have money for? Unless, of course, you've got some money tucked under the settee, which is what you're actually saying, because you're going to be able to find money, aren't you? You're not being quite open.
It's a very difficult situation because we have to bring this report to you before we've actually set the council budget. So we're in the process at the moment of still working through those figures for the Borough Council. At the moment, we are faced with a significant gap over the 4 years of our financial plan. And we are looking to draw down our general fund reserves to plug that gap, whilst we are looking for alternative ways that we can reduce the spend going forward. So it is a serious situation that we are facing as a council. We have got money set aside in the reserves, but we are utilising that. There's nothing hidden there. It's all transparent. It's all published within our financial statements. It's included in the budget monitoring reports that are published on mod.gov that you get now. So you should be able to see the reserves that we've got set aside and how we are funding our budget. When we come back to Cabinet in February, we will have an outline of our proposals for the council budget overall. So you will see as part of that process the issues that we are dealing with, and this is a small element of that that's feeding into that process. So without being able to present you with that detail today, which I haven't got because we're still working on it, but it will be available, and you will see the detail behind it when it comes to Cabinet in February and will be approved by Council at the end of February. But I'm not trying to give you any rosy picture. I'm trying to give you the stark facts of the situation that we are in financially, and it's not a good one. But I can't really say any more than that.
If I could just comment, we're putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse, whichever it goes, because we should be looking at the budget figures and then looking at your expenses, rather than looking at your expenses, which is finger in the wind. And then you're going to produce your budget. You should produce your budget first. But that may be silly, you know. As you say, when you're at home, the first thing you look at is how much money you've got, not at how you're going to spend your money, because you don't know how much you've got. So we're a bit back to front here. We look forward to your February, forgotten the word, sorry, but we look forward to your February report on how you're going to spend this money and how you're going to spend to save this money as against what figures you've got in this list here.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you must feel very frustrated about it, and I can only reflect that frustration myself, because that is the situation that we work with. We don't get our provisional government settlement until just before Christmas. So we are working on the basis of estimates, and that's how we have to work up our budget. And you will see in the financial plan that was agreed by Cabinet and Council for the current year that there are a number of assumptions that are built into that budget. So we have to have a balanced or funded budget for next year. And within the parameters and the assumptions, we are looking that we will be able to achieve that, but we are drawing down a significant sum from our general fund reserves to do that. At the moment, we are waiting for that provisional settlement to be announced, and that will obviously have an implication on the assumptions that we're currently working with, because we estimate what we're going to get from government, and it could be that there are other small elements of grants that they will feed in as part of that provisional settlement. But we won't have assurance on that until 20th of December, I think, is when they're looking to announce that. So we are preparing a budget actually before we know what funding we're getting, and it is based on estimates. Our fees and charges, we can set what our fees and charges are, but we don't know how many people are going to take up those services. It's all based on estimates. So, but we try and put some reliance on those by looking at what the volume of activity has been before, to look at what trends there are, to make some assumptions around the cost of living impact on those services. With the energy prices, we have gone out to market. We have been debating with Crown Commercial Services what they estimate those inflationary increases will be. We are waiting to see what government announces in terms of any support that they will give to help with containing some of those energy costs as well. So there has been a significant amount of work that has gone into it, but yes, they will still be reliant on estimates and assumptions that are feeding into that. And we set all of those out as part of the financial plan as well. So there is no illusion that there is any certainty on a number of the figures that are feeding through to us. And it's trying to give you the openness, the transparency and the understanding of the difficulty that we have in setting our budget in the coming years. So, okay, thank you.
3 people, I think, wanting to speak. Ben was first.
So the 23-24 budget, obviously, So if we actually pushed along the streetlight refit, we could actually reduce the cost for the 23-24 budget in electricity use. Yeah.
Potentially, but that would have to I'd have to discuss with the team where that fits in terms of their work and the timescales they've got to do that, because I don't know what their work
We're
is and what
tendering, so we can demand, we're the customer, so we can demand the terms, so we can get it done when we want, sooner.
I will take that comment back, but I'm not in a position to answer that for you today.
Thanks. Just in response to Councillor Jones' question, I think there are two aspects there. We need to weigh that up in terms of what would have to give in order to prioritise that, which is a decision that can be made. You know, it's a valid question, but also it would require capital investment to change the method of lighting, especially to go to solar. So there's arguably an amount of money that we'd have to expend in order to make a saving in the future. And again, it's something that we could do. So, you know, I'm not going to suggest that it's not possible.
I'm not talking about, you know, completely all solar, but it would be good to start chipping away at that. But certainly changing incandescent light bulbs for LED light bulbs would certainly reduce the current consumed by these lights over a period of time, which would make a dramatic saving on the utility costs.
And I think there is already a huge amount of progress with that refit programme. There have been setbacks, as you would expect. Nothing ever goes smoothly, but we are going to complete that work, so it will happen. But as far as I'm aware, that is not solar, Michelle, that is LED.
I believe so, but I haven't been involved in the letting of the contract, so I would have to go back and check.
So we need to check. But the comment that I was going to make when I asked to speak, special expenses is part of the borough's overall budget. So it's a question of deciding how much you spend in which area. The budget process is quite a protracted process because it is something that is set by government almost. As Michelle has already mentioned, we have to wait until we get the settlement from government. We've obviously made an assumption as to what that might be. Michelle has said that it could be more, or there could be additional initiatives where we might get more money. Equally, it could be less. You know, in the Chancellor's autumn statement, we had no additional leeway in terms of how much we could put up council tax by. Yet we've got huge pressures. The fact that this comes to CLAC at this stage in the year, I think, is part of the process. Councillor Hudson has said it's putting the cart before the horse, and I can see where she's coming from on that. But unfortunately, it's how it has to be. We couldn't set the budget in the required timescale for the council because that has to be completed in February. We couldn't then come back to CLAC and say, this is the impact of what's gone through in the budget process. What would you like to do? Because by then we've had to make the decision. So arguably, it's a bit of a vicious circle. And the best that we can do is to present this information that we've had tonight, ask the questions that you're quite rightly asking, and come back on that and see where we go from there. But as you can see, the amount that we're asking people to pay in their council tax who don't live in the King's Lynn area is actually going to subsidise the amount that we spend in King's Lynn. So, but they haven't taken They do, yes. And also there are special expenses elsewhere in the borough, not just in King's Lynn. So yes, you're absolutely right. And parishes have no ceiling on the amount that they can set for their council tax. But unfortunately, the borough does. And by association, the same applies to special expenses. So it's not an easy thing to do. And I sympathise with everything that people are saying this evening, but we are constrained by government regulation. So our options are limited. And with my other hat on as cabinet member for finance, we are looking at just about every possible option on finance in terms of making savings, cuts, increasing income. Almost nothing is outside the equation. So we will consider all the options that we can do. And unfortunately, we might have to make some very painful decisions, and we don't have a choice. As Michelle has said, we're going to be drawing down all of our general fund. So when we were in this position this time last year, we expected to draw down on our general fund over the 4 years of the financial plan. Where we are at the moment, we're expecting to draw all of it down in year 2 and still have a shortfall in year 2. So that's how significant the problem is and the problems that we're facing. So I won't go into it anymore, so you'll probably glaze over. It is difficult, very difficult.
For that. Councillor Kemp, Alex, please.
Thank you. Yes, for clarity, I would like to know the figure, and I apologize if I've missed it, because what I know is we've got the amount of special expenses for the current tax year, 22 to 23, is £533,320. And we project that the cost of next tax year's special expenses will be £650,130,000. Now, for comparison, could you tell us the amount that's being brought in by the residents of Lynn into the council tax coffers this tax year? I appreciate we haven't finished this tax year, but how much do we expect to come into the coffers this year? And how much do we expect to come into the coffers next year? And I appreciate the special expenses is not the whole part of the budget that that people's council tax would go into, but it would be useful because you quote the band D tax charge. Of course, not everybody's in a band D, so we can't know from that what the exact figure is. We can only surmise, but there must be figures there to show what we expect. Michelle, do you have that figure, please? Those two figures.
I don't. I will need to feed back to my revenue and benefits manager and ask her to pull the reports off the system to identify those. So again, I'll pick that up as part of the cohort of questions that I'm going to respond to you all on.
Thank you. You'll send it to everyone. Thank you, all the members. Thanks very much. I think that's quite important for us to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Alex, I should say. Yeah. Are there any more questions, please, or comments? I know some members have to go. Are there any more comments or questions? Thank you, Michelle. And you've got a bit of work to do to answer the various questions. And will they be sent to members by email? Yes. Okay. Sorry. Right. Okay. Where? Yeah. The recommendation. Yeah. And could you please read out the recommendation, please, to see whether.
Chair, we did have a proposal from Councillor Russ.
So I'm based on, thank you, Andrew, for clarifying that. Based on that clarification, I'm happy to withdraw my proposal and go ahead with those, our recommendations. So, but
The recommendations, Chair, are set out in the report, so I don't think I gave them to you, did I?
Recommendations are either leave it as it is and have no increase, or put it up by the recommended amount.
So the recommendation is that the committee endorse the special expenses charge for 23-24 as set out in section 2.2 of the report.
Right, are we all in favour? Yeah, yeah, okay, right, yeah. We're all in favour. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, members, for that. The last item is item 7, which is the date of the next meeting. Please.
The date of the next meeting is the 30th of January. Thank you.
Getting my hair done then.
Okay, thanks very much indeed then, everybody. I will close the meeting now. I think it's 6:02, 18:02. So thank you very much for attending, everybody, and a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.